You're so funny. You're kissy. What? Now you're distracted because you see what's going on out there, right? What do they see? Hi, Marianne with Parrot Free Flight Training. And this is Blaze. Blaze is a red factor sun conure, and he's quite a silly bird, aren't you? You are a silly bird. Well, what we're going to talk about today, this is an overview. It's a guide to help you understand what to do in advance of going outdoors with your flighted bird. I want to identify for you and with you free flight options, training with nature's natural timeline, the value of free flight, and what skills you and your bird need to master, how to identify the free flight levels, right? Good idea. That's a good idea. A pre-flight checklist and some essential tools that you should have on hand before you go outdoors. In addition to that, what to do in the event of a fly-off and some resources for further learning. This is by no means a complete guide to beginning free flight. It is a presentation on important things to consider and learn before you head outdoors with your bird. You're silly. In free flight, it's important to remember we want to begin with the end in mind. And what I mean by that is we want to train to purpose. And your free flight options include indoor flight in an enclosure, point-to-point flight where the bird goes off and comes back to the same point, to the same handler. We also call this A-to-A flight. There's also the option of a harness or a tether. That's very common in some of the Asian countries. In Singapore, I know they do lead line training very often. Not so often in the U.S. And I know that there are more and more people that are wanting to learn to fly with a harness or a tether. In those situations, I would encourage you to find somebody who is flying or has learned to fly on that tether or lead line. The skills required, the learning required for that is very different. Another free flight option is freestyle. Freestyle is what we consider birds where we're going to send them out. They're going to fly a bit. They might land in a tree. They might not. But the idea is that they're going to come back when recalled. At liberty is a little bit different than freestyle and often includes the birds being sent out and being unattended, where they may be out all day or they may be out 4 days, and that might be their normal lifestyle. Sport and competition flight is something that I expect will be more and more developed over the coming years as we see more and more free flyers get involved in this lifestyle. I definitely see sport and competition becoming more desirable, or another way to express yourself with your birds and free flight. My husband and I, we fly outdoors without physical restriction. Freestyle and at liberty are primarily the flight styles that we do. What is flight training? It really is learning basic skills. The bird must be proficient at controlling flight direction, speed, and landings. Now, recall is to come when called, either from a perch or in flight. See, we're really training one behavior in two different forms. Recall from flight is very different than recall from a perch. The recall cue is an audible sound. It could be a whistle, a clicking sound, a clicker. You could be calling your parrot by name. The main point is that your parrot should be getting accustomed to always hearing the same cue prior to every flight towards you. Recall from a perch teaches the bird how to control direction, speed, coordinating landings, and paying attention to your location. Recall in flight develops dealing with altitude, varied wind conditions, developing navigational skills, predator response behaviors including defensive perching and evasion skills. Rally point recognition and return or returning to the starting point. This is especially helpful in the case of a bird being spooked from an area for those who fly extreme long flights or liberty birds. Predator avoidance is the bird identifies the predator and uses evasion techniques. Now, these can be seen as dropping, jinking, flying into trees, flying back to the handler. Later, when flock flying with multiple birds, we often see predator avoidance turn to flock defense. This is where the free flight flock goes after the predator, and we'll see an example video in a few moments on this. Giving your bird the gift of flight also gives him personal autonomy, where they regulate their own behaviors. So when we follow nature and train with purpose, we are going to be working within the timing that naturally occurs. Now, when we do this, we greatly increase our chances of success. So we have to understand natural fledgling age for the bird or the species that you are flying. It varies. It's often around 14 weeks with many of the macaw species and can be much younger for the smaller species of birds. Your bird may still be on formula feedings several times a day when it is learning its natural fledgling behavior. Young birds are often ready before we are to move forward to the next step. So we need to work on ourselves first. We need to know what we need to do. Then we'll have a better chance of getting the results we want and getting the bird doing what they need to be doing. So you want to arrange your environment for the greatest chance of success. We create situations for the bird to be successful. In an indoor environment, from indoor perch to handler, we might start with something like working in a short, narrow hallway, asking the bird to come just a short distance, maybe only a few inches to begin with. And then by increasing that distance as the bird learns to come to you in that environment. By training in that small area, you're giving the bird no option to do anything other than fly to you. You want to develop and train behavior that helps the bird live in our world. Think about your lifestyle and how a flying pet bird needs to behave for you all to be happy and safe. This is what we train to. Now, there's many of free flight styles. You need to identify and determine what will work for you. Free flight is a partnership. We are not their masters. We are their caretakers. It is our responsibility to give them the tools and the abilities so that they can take care of themselves in those situations that they need to. Big or long outdoor free flights are not for everyone and not for every bird. Having said that, a bird that learns free flight skills, they're more likely to survive if they are lost. Flight training builds physical strength, conditioning, coordination. It takes care of mental and social skills in a way that nothing else can. It keeps them occupied and engaged. There's that mental and then the physical agility, navigation skills, foraging skills, escape and avoidance skills. Those all come with free-flighted birds. Now, navigation skills develop in sequence. First, the bird's going to learn the visual and be restricted to line of sight. That's why when we have a bird on the ground, when they're little babies and we're calling them to come to us, we want to make sure that they can see us so that they learn how to navigate to us. We then add the audio or the response and the contact calls. That becomes another intricate part of navigation skills and development. Then the visual based on recognition of the terrain and knowing your last known location. This is rally point, and birds learn in this sequence. Predator evasion skills develop in sequence as well. Instinctive, fearful reactions to an unfamiliar object. Familiar objects are identified throughout the bird's life, and then we desensitize those familiar objects that are safe. reaction to recognize potentially dangerous objects, to develop various avoidance skills in non-threatening situations. This includes jinking, sky-dropping maneuvers, and rapid directional changes, returning to the safety of the handler or the tree or the bush. And then we talk about distinguishing between perceived threats and actual threats, and develop appropriate behavior response to each. Hawks are a threat. Turkey vultures are watched, but they're not a threat. Birds need to learn to distinguish between these threats.
Come on, big bird. Come on, Jazzy. Come on. It's an airplane. Oh, and a turkey vulture. Come on. Come on, big bird. Will you come? How about if I come closer? Will you come now? Come on. I see it. Yeah, I see him. But you. That's it. Good boy.
When we talk about free flight training, we always must have the conversation about risk. It is risky to free fly your bird. It is our job as handlers, as trainers, as owners, as caretakers to mitigate the risk by training and preparation. So you have the options of trainers and classes, mentors and flying groups. You can also learn from video and YouTube, or you can figure it out yourself. In order to mitigate the most risk, you will learn more faster by working with trainers and taking classes, working with mentors and fly groups. YouTube videos or videos in general all have their purpose, but they are not going to be helpful to your specific situation in most cases. And yes, you can figure it out yourself, as did many people in the early years of free flight. However, today we have lots of resources, and there's very, very little reason for you to try to just sit and figure this out yourself. The risk certainly outweighs the reward. What is the reward? It's fun. We build stronger, healthier, happier birds. We build great relationships with your bird. You become better friends, better relationships. There's tons of great photo opportunities, and I assure you, you will meet new people. The risk involved with free flight, really the list is long and there probably is no end to it. But to begin with, your bird might fly off. You might lose your bird. Your bird might be chased or attacked by other birds. Your bird may land in an unsafe area. Private property, dogs, power lines, traffic, busy streets, those are all problematic for free flight. Someone may steal your bird, or your bird might be killed. The key to safe free flight is to manage and mitigate the risk. We do this by training the birds, recall, and training the handlers to choose safe areas and to fly and to be prepared at all times. It's important to master behaviors before moving on. And then after you've moved on, go back to those basics to reevaluate and reinforce the behaviors that your bird has learned. Our basic flight skills are, you need to be skilled in up and down, around, indoors or in an aviary. Maneuverability around objects, away from the handler and back, that boomerang style, that controlled direction speed, confident and controlled landings. Those are things you must train for. The bird needs to be trained to be calm and confident outside. Noise, planes, cars, kids. A spooked bird will not respond reliably. You've got to condition them to accept change. Change your routine often when you are working and training your bird so that they learn to expect the unexpected. Build a reliable recall in a variety of locations and conditions. over and over. I cannot overemphasize the importance of a reliable recall. Make it fun. Create a game. Go back and forth from a perch or back and forth to another person. Go hide around the corner and call your bird, but get that reliable recall down really strongly before you go outdoors. Now, your communication, you need to work at getting your bird to call back to you. This is a little bit more difficult with some species. However, with macaws and most of the conures, it's pretty easy to train the bird to respond to your whistle, to your voice, to your call. You've learned to praise this behavior, and callbacks can make the difference in a successful retrieval if you have a fly-off. I've seen many cases where a bird was in a tree and people on the ground looking and looking and looking, but because that bird was quiet, nobody ever spotted him up in that dense foliage of the tree. So that communication is super important. Physically fit. Flying outdoors is much more demanding than indoors, and so you never ever fly a sick or an injured bird. Always make sure that the bird is at the peak of physical fitness. And then a solid relationship with you, that trainer, the handler. Your bird must trust you and must want to come to you. You have to provide the value for the bird. And this can be many things. It can be food, water, social interaction, security. But it must be something the bird wants to and is willing to work for. You are really the sudden. You've got 2 cents worth? Okay, some additional training goals to consider is harness training. Now, we only use a harness to keep a bird restrained, and that is when we are in areas where pets are required to be on a leash. So if we go to a state park where it would be inappropriate to let our bird be off leash and fly because there's signs posted everywhere that say all pets on a leash, well, we have the opportunity to be there with our birds on a leash, and so we want to make sure that we've trained for the use of that harness or that tether. Voluntary crate entry. If you can train your bird to fly down and to enter into the crate and voluntarily walk into it, that can sometimes be an extraordinarily good tool if you have a bird that flies off. Also just nice when you have to go to the vet or anything else to be able to have your bird voluntarily enter that crate. Tricks. Tricks are fun, and they keep your bird engaged, and they keep them excited. And it can be just a fun way of adding value to your relationship. A foot mount or tail mount GPS. Now, we like our birds to be willing to accept either one, and you do need to train your bird to be able to tolerate and take that foot mount or that tail mount. Toweling, it's a good idea to teach your bird how to accept a towel appropriately, as most vets and vet will towel a bird so that they can get an exam done. I think step up and step off and go poop are essential training goals. For me, I think it's totally inappropriate. If you're smart enough to train a bird to free flight, you should be smart enough to train your bird not to poop on your shoulder. A clicker training, this is a basis for training and communication. It's imperative that the handler learn proper timing with the use of that clicker. Improper clicker use can actually do more harm than good. So if you do not feel confident that you have good clicker skills, then it's time for you to revisit that and get your bird on track with that communication. The whistle recall is a really great training goal or tool when outdoor flying. If your bird is flown far enough that your voice cannot call them back, the whistle can often be heard much longer. One of my first gifts as a free flyer came from Buddy Wesky in the form of a hurricane whistle. And I would certainly suggest, if you are going to do outdoor free flight, that you get yourself a good hurricane whistle. Contact callback. Now this can make a huge difference. You're a little loud. I know that's a good call. Yes, that's exactly what we want you to do is call back. And I know I covered this earlier, but contact calling is super important. Teach your bird to respond to your voice. If I call my birds, I want them to call me back. That way I know where they're at, and it's just a great form of communication. It's an important training point. Fly in areas that are appropriate to your bird's skill level. You must learn to evaluate your bird and the surroundings. In understanding the basic levels of difficulty, we classify flying environments in levels 0 through 5. Level 0 is indoor or inside a caged or confined space. Level 1 is flat open space with great visibility and access in all directions for maximum effectiveness in recovery efforts. I want to be able to see all the way around where that bird is flying, and that's a level 1. Level 5 is a rugged terrain with very limited visibility and restricted access and virtually no recovery potential other than the bird returning on its own. You need to master each level before moving on. And then after you do move on, go back to your basics often. A learning goal for free flight is the bird handles the terrain features of nearly any kind and safely returns to the handler every time. Return to rally point or a feeding station or a handler, and the difficulty is increased in each level to encourage advanced navigational skills. This is Moab, Utah. This is what we consider a level 3 fly area. There's some recessed canyon areas around us, but still pretty reliably or relatively easy to recover a bird if the bird didn't come back. Level 0 is confined area inside a building or flight cage. It's usually carpeted or smooth floor and still air. It could also be outdoors, and it could be a dirt or a grassy area. But number 1 is to introduce the basic physical flying skills. Now this includes speed, controlled landings, flying up, flying down, flying around blind corners. Introduce recall, introduce behavioral flight skills. This is cued recall. Step off, fly away to a perch or station. And then we introduce changes in the handler's location. This is where we play a lot of hide and seek indoors. The thing here is that you want to limit your bird's options. Only give them the option to succeed. And when you're in level 0 inside of confined spaces, typically these are going to be our homes, so be very careful of windows. Your bird must learn that it cannot fly through the window, and it can easily be severely hurt if it flies into a window. So window coverings will help prevent that problem, or blinds, something to create the illusion that that is not an open space that the bird can fly into. This is little Miss Breeze, and she was probably about maybe 10 weeks old. And we're learning some basic recall skills. We just have her in line of sight. She can see us, and we want her just to come to us. She has not, at this point in time, she had not yet learned to really flap her wings and to get any kind of lift. Now, before you go outdoors the first time and every time, you never want to get complacent on the following. This is a pre-flight checklist, and you always keep a backpack ready to go. In addition to our backpack, we have additional supplies just in case we need something. We'll go over the basics of what's in our bag and in our box and why we carry certain items. But being prepared also includes comfy clothing for the area you're going to fly in. You don't want to show up in the desert with sandals or flip-flops. You need to be ready to hike a hill, climb a tree, maybe even jump a fence. The other thing is don't fly solo. You need a great flight crew. Your flight crew is a very important component to safe free flight. Cultivate a friendship or a family member or another free flyer to work with you. Flight crew members need to understand what their role is. Flight crew members understand the goal of training and how they can support you and your bird. Will you use GPS? And just as importantly, you must know how to use it. Practice having a flight crew member hide the transmitter and see if you can find it. You are the one who is ultimately responsible for your bird's safety. Many problems can be avoided by spending some time evaluating the location in advance. And what you feed and how you feed play a large role in motivating your bird. We increase the value of the reinforcer by not including it in the bird's normal diet. Now, your bird must have excellent indoor recall. This includes back and forth to the perch, to another handler, flying up from the ground level to you on command, flying down from heights to you on command, coming to you from blind corners on command. Some suggested reading that I want to share with you is, if you haven't already read it, Don't Shoot the Dog. You can find that on Amazon. There's a Facebook group, 911 Parrot Alert. They also have a website. They've got some wonderful protocols that have been written by many bird experts who have firsthand knowledge and experience in recovering and retrieving birds. And then also Natural Encounters has a wonderful website with lots of papers. And so I'm going to give you just a brief view of each one of those. Here's your quick little Amazon link to Don't Shoot the Dog. You can see that it is the art of teaching and training. It's available for very inexpensive, less than $16, and it's a great resource. 911 Parrot Alert. This is their website. You can find areas on what to do if you find a bird, if you lose a bird. There's a database, there's discussions, all kinds of information in here. What I would suggest that you do is that you go in and you download their scenarios. So you've got this one here on their Google Drive. This is the protocol. And you can download that and read through it. It's a well-written piece, certainly covers just about everything that you would need to understand what to do if a bird goes missing. So please, please use that resource. Additionally, Natural Encounters is an amazing organization. They are in Florida. And they have a papers and presentations section where you can go through it and read some very, very well-written documents. They also offer some training, but the naturalencounters.com is a super good resource for many, many things. One of my favorite is The Anatomy of a Fly-Off. It's just a very interesting read, and it breaks down some of the thoughts of the author and the experience of what's going on in a free flight and how to deal with that. Some common goals for each level. Things to keep in mind. Your recovery potential, the visibility and access, that's paramount to the level, what's going on with the level. Skill development with varied conditions, loss of sight or the handler or obstacles, and to establish focus on the handler and on rally point. Let's talk a little bit about your flight crew. Your flight crew is really important, especially if you're an inexperienced handler or you're first starting with free flight. You just don't want to fly alone. There's too many things that can go wrong, and as a solo person, you are less equipped to be able to react and do everything that's necessary to retrieve that bird quickly. Birds that are too friendly and land on strangers are at a much bigger risk of theft and or a lawsuit against the owner. I ask all of my flight crew members never to allow my birds to land on them. I'm going to run this short little video for you. I want you to see this is my flight crew. And what I want you to notice is that my flight crew is quiet. They're not yakking it up. They're not calling the birds. They're actually watching and paying attention to what's going on with the birds. Really important that you always watch where your bird is and keep that line of sight. You can see also this is a level 1, wide open spaces. There's easily a mile in every direction where we can retrieve a bird if we need to. Your flight crew is to be supportive. Your flight crew's job is to keep an eye on your bird and to also understand what your training goals are. So if you're training your bird for free flight, where you're going to be doing free flight in areas where there's going to be other people, you certainly don't want your bird to land on a stranger or your free flight crew. You need that bird to come back to you every time. This is an example of level 1, wide open spaces, unrestricted view and access to see the bird wherever it goes, and the ability to follow it without restriction. I personally like a minimum of half a mile in all directions. Flat plains, agricultural fields, sports fields all fall under this category of level 1. And so the goal here is to introduce flying with no walls. It's an open space. There are no obstacles. We want calm weather conditions. We're going to introduce flying in a new location with no loss of sight to the handler. And we want to establish focus on the handler location and return to that location. Those are your goals of level 1. This is kind of what outdoor flying day 1 might look like. First, you want to evaluate the fly area. Check for hazards. Are there any native nesting birds? Are there large, loud equipment? Is there traffic? Other distractions, weather, wind, dogs, other animals? All of those things you must evaluate before you send your bird off. Now you can see in this video here, way over in the back, there are some power lines there, so there is some risk there. There are some way back in the distance over there as well, but for the most part, this is wide open fields where I have great visibility. You also want to check your bird's overall attitude and health. And then, how is their motivation for your reinforcers? Again, we never fly a sick or an injured bird. I also don't want to fly my birds when they're super hungry, but I want to make sure that the reinforcers that I'm using have value. So we never use nice nuts in our birds' daily food rations. They get nice nuts like pecans and pistachios and whatever their favorite nut is. Those are the reinforcers that we use, and we use those only when we're training or when we're reinforcing a behavior. Check your equipment. Before you send that bird off, make sure that your GPS is working and that you have plenty of battery. Your two-way radios are charged and working on the same channel, and your cell phones are all fully charged. That the perch to handler is no more than 3 feet apart. This is outdoor flying day 1. So we're going to start very, very close to the bird, and we're only going to do the same things outdoors day 1 that we did indoors, right? So that perch to handler, handler to perch, no more than 3 feet apart. Handler to handler at no more than 3 feet apart. Then you can start to gradually increase the distance to 6 feet maybe, or 5 feet. And then if the bird is successful and the bird's response time is relatively quick, you can increase a bit more. We don't want to push for big flights. Today is about getting comfortable being outdoors, unconfined and untethered. You may want to spend time sitting doing nothing more than being outside together. You can practice step up and any tricks that your bird has already learned sitting outdoors, relaxed. Outdoor hazards that you want to avoid. Power lines and transformers have the potential of electrocution. Roads have the potential for collision with cars and trucks. The traffic, the noise interferes with communication and the focus of you and the bird. Private or public property with fenced areas and no trespassing signs may make it impossible for you to follow a bird. Predator and native birds often will defend their areas. Hawks, ravens, crows, seagulls, even small birds will chase off a young or inexperienced pet bird out of the area. Now, a bird of prey may chase and or kill your bird. Large bodies of water, you want to avoid those. Dog areas, dog parks, pet walking areas, those are all to be avoided. Most dogs will go after a parrot. It's their natural instinct. It's a good reason to train your free-flighted bird to stay off the ground and stay away from dogs. People will always tell you that their dogs are friendly and it's safe. That's fine for that particular dog. However, chances are if you're an outdoor free flyer, you're going to come into a situation where you're going to be around dogs that their instinctual behavior is going to be to go after your bird. The current conditions will add a level of difficulty. So when we talk about still air, that does not change our level of difficulty. We call that a 0. Calm air, dry, not rain is a number 1. 2, a light breeze, light rain or snow on the ground. And we kick up to wind gusts, moderate rain, light mist or fog. And then the winds that interact with landforms to create updrafts or currents. Also dense mist or fog can create more difficulty. Wind and landforms may interact to create unsafe conditions, and then falling snow is something that you likely are not going to want to fly in. Wait till it's done snowing and then go back out and enjoy it. Oh, in this video, what you notice is this appears to be a pretty good level 1, maybe a level 2 flight area, and you may be able to hear the wind. And you'll see it ruffling Rob's shirt there. So that wind is increasing the level of difficulty. So that level would have been a level 1 on a calm day. And it still is a level 1, but now we've introduced some breeziness, some slight wind gusts that are going to increase that level of difficulty. Now, rally point, we refer to the specific starting location of release as the rally point. When we change locations to increase the skill level, it's important that the birds develop the skills to identify local landmarks and use them to navigate back to the specific release area. And that can be an area for feeding or housing. But rally point is super important if you're going to fly Liberty or freestyle. So our anti-predator learning goals, birds need to understand who the predators are, recognize them. Navigation during and following escape maneuvers, and then the overall goal is for the birds to be alert, to recognize and respond to these perceived threats appropriately, and safely return to rally point every time. This video you're going to see, this is predator avoidance. There's a hawk coming in. That's a Harris hawk coming in. You'll see one bird escape to the backside. The other bird is being chased in hot pursuit. You can kind of see I've slowed the motion down here so you can actually see that Harris hawk going in after our macaw tango. What happens as this afternoon or this moment continues is that the Harris hawk chases Tango off for a bit. The other three macaws will rally together, and in that distance you'll see these birds way out here in the distance. Those are all the birds coming back in after they turned and chased that hawk out of the area. I do have another video that's posted where you can watch this again over and over again and see the entire thing. But this, how to deal with predators, and then the flock dynamic that goes with that if you're flying multiple birds is really very interesting. And it's a skill that will help your free flight, anxiety. Right? If your birds are well versed in the skies and able to deal with predators appropriately. All right. So be prepared to lose your bird, and you may never need to. What do I mean by that? I mean you need to train and train and train some more. Then you need to fly in appropriate levels to the bird's skill and to your comfort and skill. You need to pack a bag. Be prepared. Have everything that you need in advance, dress appropriately, and have a game plan. Know what you're going to do ahead of time. That's why I want you to go back and read the recovery protocols from 911 Parrot Alert, because that's going to give you a game plan for what to do just in case. And honestly, if you are prepared to lose your bird, means you are trained, you are appropriate, you are packed and dressed and ready to go, chances are you'll never need to. In being prepared, our backpack includes the following items. Now I have my cards, I have business cards, and I have them made at Vistaprint. They're very, very reasonable. We carry two-way radios, the bird treats, a small hand mirror. I carry that small hand mirror because if I get too far away from everybody else in a group and I'm up hiking a hill looking for somebody's bird and our radios may not be working and maybe our cell phones aren't working, I can use that small hand mirror to signal. Right? Somebody knows I'm up there and I need help, or that I'm just trying to communicate or turn your radios on or what's going on. But a small hand mirror is very helpful, especially if you're out in rugged terrain. Binoculars, human snacks, your survival kit with a reflective blanket. I want to be prepared. If I have to be out overnight, I want to be ready to be out overnight, and I don't want to be uncomfortable out there. A water and dish, a water spray bottle, especially if you're flying in warm areas, warm climates. Our personal business cards are our bird cards, and I will show you an example of those here in just a minute. Pillowcases. Why a pillowcase? I carry a pillowcase just because sometimes I'm out recovering somebody's bird that is not my bird. And in those cases, that bird may not be familiar or comfortable with me. I likely can get that bird picked up and put into a pillowcase if I have to, say, climb down a big steep bank or someplace else and bring that bird back to the handler. So a pillowcase is just one of those small things. It doesn't weigh very much. It takes up hardly any space, and it allows me just that peace of mind to know that I have everything that I could possibly need. Sunscreen, bug repellent, depending on the area that you're in. An area map. We use a Gaia, a GPS, and that GPS mapping system is a subscription that you buy annually, but it's worth its weight in gold because it shows terrain, it shows local hiking trails, and lots of other things. And so that's an area map that we keep on our phone, and you can download an area. So if you're headed out to an area, you can download that to your cell phone and have it in GPS mode so you can tell exactly where you are. And then, of course, a small first aid kit.
This is what our business card looks like, and it really is just a way that we can have photos of the birds and an easy way to hand to people for lots of different reasons. But contact information, so we're out traveling, people can get a hold of us. We have both our cell phone numbers on there.
Our backup box includes things like extra GPS parts, kind of our repair kit for our Marshall GPS system. We have lost bird flyers, big flyers, clear tape so that we can stick those flyers up anywhere we need to, a heavy-duty stapler because sometimes a stapler is better than tape, extra batteries and charging cords for both the cell phones, the GPS system, and the two-way radios, extra water and food, and that bird first aid kit. Additionally, we carry a crate or a portable cage because that allows our birds are trained to come back to the crates. And so that's just an easy system to have that portable cage. All right, let's talk about some different flight levels. So in a level 2, there might be buildings, trees, or terrain that might block the view of the bird. You would have a minor difficulty in getting to the bird's location. You're going to have some mild elevation changes, maybe some trees and hills, boulders, rock fields, human objects, fences, parked cars, that type of thing. We want to introduce very mild elevation changes in breezy conditions. Introduce a momentary loss of sight, right? So that they might just peek out of sight for a small moment. And then that will increase the awareness of the handler location and that reliable return. This is an example of a level 2 free flight area. This is White Sands, New Mexico. And you can see we've got some hills. But those hills, and also you'll hear wind in the background, but those hills basically end up creating that opportunity for the bird to be out of sight.
Oh,
See, poor Mackie. That was MacGyver when he was probably just about a year old. His feathers were just a wreck. You could see how beat up he was, but he did a lot of his flight training on that particular trip. We took about a 2-week trip and jaunted around New Mexico and Utah and Arizona. In a level 3, we're talking about the landforms can hamper the recovery in some places, and you have areas of limited visibility of the bird. You can have significant elevation changes, maybe big trees or multiple buildings or noticeable noise levels. Here we want to introduce significant elevation changes. We're going to introduce several seconds of loss of sight potential, and then we want to be able to observe that reliable return to the handler's location. You can see here we've got some big valleys. This is Death Valley, I believe. We hiked back into the mountain. And so the birds are able to fly way out of line of sight, and so it increases their requirement for them to have better navigational skills, and that rally point recognition becomes very important.
there he is. Good boy.
And this next location, at level 4, there may be many spots where recovery is very difficult. It can require significant effort on the bird's part to navigate or see. And we can have intricate landforms, multiple elevations, areas of dense trees, medium noise level. Here we're going to introduce some major elevation changes and introduce several minute loss of sight potential. And really we're making these last adjustments to the reliability of the return to that handler's location. Super important that the birds really be getting that rally point recognition where they're really getting those navigational skills.
Hey, pretty girl.
That's little Miss Breeze flying in from down below. In level 5, recovery is likely not possible without extensive crew and equipment. So extreme landforms, canyons, cliffs, tall, close buildings, dense forest, high noise level. You don't want to introduce new skills for the bird. It's got to be come down to that reliable return to the handler with a minimal recovery potential. It's like if the bird doesn't come back on its own, you're gonna be in trouble. And so we really need to understand that level 5 recovery is likely impossible. The bird must return on its own. This is in Moab, Utah. This is definitely a level 5. You can see if the bird did not come back, it would be likely impossible to recover this bird. The golden rules of free flight. Ignore these rules if you would like to spend the night under a tree. Never fly in an area you do not want to retrieve in. If it's an area that you can't hike in, you shouldn't be flying in it. Never fly a sick or injured bird. Never move up to a more challenging level until the skills are mastered at the level that you're at. Keep in mind the level of difficulty of flying can change without changing your location. So if the weather conditions change, if you're flying with more experienced birds, or there's distraction of people or animals or something like that, that can all change the difficulty of flying in an area. And that includes off-site or new location flying. And then never fly a bird that seems out of sorts. If he's mad at you or somebody's just having a bad day, just let that not be a free flight day. You may still end up spending the night under a tree. Stuff happens. Birds fly off. Birds get spooked from one thing or another that maybe you haven't introduced them to before. Things can happen in spite of all your best efforts. So you do definitely need to be prepared for a fly-off, for something, the inevitable that could happen. Maybe it never will, but if you're prepared for it, at least then you can have some peace of mind knowing you've done everything in your power to free fly as safely as possible. So, trees are often a big topic of debate in free flight and the free flight community. We train for trees, specifically. I want my birds to be able to get in and out of a tree for protection if they need it. And I want my birds to come on recall out of the tree. So we do train specifically for that. I put a bird in a tree, let them get used to it. And the other thing is, if birds have time in trees where they get to chew and forage and have some fun, then they're less likely to want to go hang out in trees all the time. So we give them this tree time as part of their training, and it acts as an opportunity for predator avoidance. If they need to get away from a predator bird, they can go to a tree. And I want them to have the skill of flying in and out of a tree equally as well. This particular tree is full of thorns. It is not a nice tree to be in, and the bird's handling it very, very well. Then we also have the distraction of the other bird flying in. And when I call, I get that recall out of the tree. That's the type of behavior that we're trying to teach our flighted birds for the style of free flight that my husband and I do. All right, I want to take just a moment to talk about lead line training. Lead line training is very controversial, and so let's have a quick, short conversation on lead line use. Lead line training is the norm in Singapore and some other Asian countries. And there are very, very, very many successful flyers in those parts of the world. It has been a practice frowned upon in the U.S. by Western free flyers over the years, and I've heard the term dope on a rope as a slang against lead line training practices. The problem for most Western flyers is we have no local experts in lead line, and so that presents its own set of risks. So if you're going to lead line train, you need to enlist the assistance and the help of somebody who is experienced in lead line training. In my opinion, and in most cases, a lead line is simply not necessary, provided you follow the basic protocols and practices of indoor training, progressing to easy outdoor locations. What if you lose your bird? Don't panic. Carefully watch the flight direction. Use landmarks to track the bird. Keep an eye on it. Immediately follow the path of the bird. Keep radio contact with your spotters, your flight crew, At least one person needs to remain at the takeoff site if there are others on the ground that can go follow the bird. When your bird is out of sight, stop, call, and listen. Walk some more, stop, call, and listen. Remember to print and refer to the 911 Parrot Alert protocols, and that's that search and retrieval protocol that they have on their website. They also have a Facebook page. Remember, your best chance of finding the bird depends on a quick retrieval. If you are unable to locate your bird quickly, assemble your friends and family. They become your boots on the ground team. You need to run your recovery like a general. Volunteers are needed to keep an eye on social media, contact vet offices, pet shelters, rescues and sanctuaries, manage a map of the area, volunteers to put up posters, to talk to locals. Always leave at least one person at rally point with everything else that's going on. Most birds will be the most active and vocal at dusk and at sunrise. You and your team outdoors listening during dusk and sunrise are imperative. Most birds are located within a mile or so of their last known location, so have your boots on the ground team spread out and paying attention. Two-way radios are very helpful in this situation. You still want to fly birds. Find a willing breeder to sell you a young bird. It is possible to fly older birds, however, the risk for the bird and the potential for loss become greater. Your work as a trainer becomes more demanding, and the final abilities of the bird may be diminished. Take classes, find mentors or other free flyers, create your own free flight group. Be willing to dedicate hours and have failures. Be thick-skinned. Not everyone supports the lifestyle of flighted birds. And be kind and helpful and be supportive to the other birds and bird handlers in our community. Free flight friendly breeders allow us to get the birds young enough so that we can train them to fly with the same natural timing that nature would provide for. That fledging age is so important. Obviously, do not clip wings. Create a space for safe flying. An indoor and an outdoor enclosed area is ideal. This is what it looks like in the editing room. I often have plenty of help. I hope you've enjoyed this short presentation. I hope it's created some value for you. Happy and safe flying, everyone. Everybody looking up? I don't see it. It is up there though, isn't it? And everybody's looking up. Is there a beastie up there? What do you see? Ah! If my eyes were better, I could probably see it too.